5 years ago, the game formerly known as Project Eve was first announced, and it reminded people of another game that had just released in the years prior, NieR Automata. Now, I've made quite a few videos on NieR Automata, but its unforgettable music, story, characters, and world is one that will stick with me for the rest of my life. However, despite the NieR IP exploding for Square Enix, selling even more than many recent Final Fantasy games, they still have yet to produce a NieR 3. It's something that I find absolutely confounding. However, Stellar Blade and its deep inspirations from NieR Automata are filling that exact gap. The post-apocalyptic cute robot girl genre lives on, and today we have some incredibly fascinating information to discuss, because two legends from that genre have sat down and discussed their creative process. Hyung-tae Kim of Stellar Blade and Yoko Taro of NieR Automata sat down with IGN, discussing both of their games, having some deeply interesting conversation about the Japanese and Korean game industry, and Yoko Taro being the absolute jester that he is. So please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are actively working on 97,000 subscribers to hit 100k before the end of the year, and every sub counts. Yoko Taro immediately broke the internet with his first statement in the interview. Classic Taro, him saying that, quote, "Stellar Blade is a really amazing game. I'd say it's much better than NieR Automata. I've been acquainted with Mr. Kim's work since Magna Carta, Tears of Blood. Your illustrations are of a high quality. Magna Carta Tears of Blood came out before Drakengard, the first game I directed. So while I'm the older one, to me in this industry, you're my senior." The internet went absolutely crazy over Yoko Taro saying that Stellar Blade is a much better game than NieR. It was really strange to me that it caused so much discourse. Yoko Taro has been known to be a huge troll in interviews, and one of the ways in which he facilitates his comedy is through self-defecation with his own games.
ってことは何が起きるかというと、こんな感じで逃げた先でもいいやば死ぬという、どっち行っても死ぬっていう理由なんですね。
Although one can also think of it as just being a really humble guy too. And although we are just weeks away from Stellar Blade's release, whether that game will end up being better than NieR Automata or not remains to be seen. However, Taro did elaborate on why he feels that Stellar Blade is better than NieR Automata. He says that, quote, "The graphics are completely next-gen quality, and the character's design direction is amazing. The cool male characters and cute female characters unique to Mr. Kim's style are really appealing. Shops in RPGs often have a close-up shot of the shopkeeper, which I don't like because it feels unnatural. Stellar Blade has a shot like that too, but the shopkeeper was so cute that I didn't mind. Her cuteness felt more important than any design choices." Kim then tagging in saying, "Actually, this has been a problem for us. Many users say that the girl at the shop is cuter than the main character. I guess we need to make her the main character in our next game." By this point, many of you are probably really curious on what this shopkeeper looks like, and I've managed to find an image of her here that you can see on screen now. Taro also argued that he thinks that more people would prefer Eve over 2B, as he said that 2B is such an unconventional character, with Yoko Taro elaborating on how they came up with such an unconventional design, saying, quote, "In a battle action game with a sci-fi setting, a conventional character would be a male character that shoots a gun, wearing clothes reminiscent of the United States Marine Corps. But there's already Halo and other games like that. Didn't make sense for me to make something like that. I wouldn't be able to do that better than Western developers anyway. Since we're further away from that culturally, I wanted to make a different style of game that has less competition. That's why we went for a sci-fi action game with a female protagonist, clad in black and blindfolded. At the same time, there wasn't anything like it. But now that Stellar Blade is about to enter the room, I feel it will soon become a crowded market." With Kim replying that your games are way too unique to be imitated. I wouldn't worry. They both mentioned that NieR Automata and Stellar Blade are likely to draw a lot of comparisons, but other than having beautiful mechanical heroines, they aren't that similar, and they say that you'll notice this right away when playing the games. In both Automata's Taro as well as Stellar Blade's Kim find inspiration in both the same media, and that is Neon Genesis Evangelion. With Taro saying, "The work I was most inspired by is Neon Genesis Evangelion. I thank you for praising NieR Automata's story, but actually it's pretty much just a retelling storytelling of Evangelion, so there's not much originality to it. I don't watch recent movies, so I'm mostly inspired by works I saw in the past. Kim saying, I was inspired by Evangelion as well. It's not easy to create something that surpasses your inspiration source. In that regard, NieR Automata has a unique taste that only you could make. I really envy that. I'm a visualist, not a storyteller, so I can't compare to Mr. Yoko when it comes to the story department, but I believe that Stellar Blade's gameplay makes up for that shortcoming. Taro was asked how he finds the balance between business and creativity, and he replied, for me, it depends on the phase of development. I start thinking about the business side, but by the end, not so much anymore. So at first I listen to what the publisher wants from me, but later I don't. So as I was saying, Yoko Taro is absolutely never serious at all. Taro also talks about the differences between Automata and Stellar Blade. In particular, he says that Stellar Blade is a lot more challenging than NieR Automata, with him saying, quote, it's a lot of fun. At first, I couldn't beat the first stage's boss. The action is very deep. Overcoming challenges by mastering the action felt great. In NieR Automata, the action is much simpler, but there's a reason for that. Since many of Square Enix's audience are RPG players, many of them aren't familiar with action games and they prefer to focus on the story. This is why we went for simple gameplay that can easily make the player feel good. Stellar Blade is a much more challenging game, which I thought was interesting. Indeed, this has also been a criticism of a lot of Square Enix's action games as well. They wanted to make action games, but they didn't want their existing turn-based audience to feel alienated by these action games. Though at this point, I do think most people play action games of some variety, and so I don't think it would be a bad thing if the next NieR or the next Final Fantasy and to demand more of the player in its action. Kim saying that he didn't want to make the game overly difficult, however, because he's not great at action games himself, with him saying, quote, during development, I complained about the difficulty if I couldn't advance to the next segment, but one of the planners showed me how easy it was for them. They said, look, it's already this easy. Making it even easier wouldn't feel right. But I wanted to be sure that the game wasn't too difficult in my own eyes. I want every type of player to be able to enjoy the game and see it through to the end. Stellar Blade is a game that has a lot to offer than just combat, so I hope RPG players will give it a try too. Yoko Taro replying, I'll play Stellar Blade on story mode and use all the support features when it releases. It seems as though Taro will not be clearing a Soulsborne game anytime soon. Though speaking of Soulsborne games, those types of action games are on the rise. Currently, there are more games that lean closer to Soulsborne than they do a hack and slash like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. The interviewer comments on this saying, so you both want players to be able to casually enjoy your games. At the same time, due to the rise of the Soulsborne genre, we are living in a period in which it's okay for games to be difficult. With Final Fantasy XVI being developed as a pure action game, Square Enix's games are leaning more and more toward the action genre as well. How do you approach game design and difficulty balance in such a climate? Kim notes that these games are incredibly hard to make because they don't have a difficulty setting, making getting the balance right even harder. This is why Stellar Blade also features a story mode. Taro notes something very interesting here, saying that when looking at Soulsborne games from a business perspective, you can see that FromSoft invented the idea of selling difficulty as a product. Until then, it was a trend to make things more casual and stress-free, but they made stress in itself a product. However, since this is Hidetaka Miyazaki's invention, I don't see any reason to try to copy that. I would rather invent something different instead. I think that all games benefit from having an appropriate amount of difficulty. Whenever you make a game too easy, the problem is that there is no reason to actively engage with the systems. Why not just cheese everything if you can? I don't think that every player loves brutal difficulty, and I think that games outside of Soulsborne games having an easy mode is a good idea, but I do think that every game should have a way to challenge the player, make them really engage in the game and incentivize them to do that. Difficulty forces you to engage with the game and utilize all of its systems to the fullest, and by the end I always find myself much more deeply appreciative of a game that does. They then talked about the Japanese and South Korean game markets, with Taro saying, as for games, it has proven difficult for Japanese companies to implement Western systems. Japan has a long history with companies developing their own engines, and it was hard to move away from that. We were very late with incorporating rendering tools and middleware from the West. Even to this day, many schools don't teach this to new developers. I think that Japanese people are not good at adapting to technology from overseas. Chinese and South Korean games are much faster to use use engines like Unreal for games with a Japanese aesthetic, with Kim noting that he thinks that Chinese games actually best understand what otaku gamers want. Taro closed out by saying that he thinks that Stellar Blade is of a really high technological level, and that he's really interested in seeing how Western gamers will react to it. Personally, I'm dreading that part, but we don't have much longer to go until Stellar Blade finally launches. Let me know your thoughts with this interview with Taro and Kim in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video.